What's going on, everyone? Captain Horn here. Welcome back to another Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 video. I hope you enjoy watching and maybe even learn a thing or two from this video. Before we begin, if you would like to see more Microsoft Flight Simulator content, please consider subscribing to my channel. It takes less than 5 seconds and it would greatly help my channel out. If you are interested in supporting myself and my channel, be sure to check out the different tiers in my Patreon for different rewards. If you are interested in becoming an active member in my community, or would like to find others to fly with in Microsoft Flight Simulator, feel free to join my Discord. The link to both my Patreon and Discord are in the description. Let's get right into this video. Hello everybody, welcome back to another Captain Horn 23 video. Today we will be learning how to calculate the top of descent for any aircraft in Microsoft Flight Simulator. Now this is not an exact value, and this method is meant to be easy enough to calculate quickly and be generally correct for the most part. It will for sure get you on the right track, at least until Microsoft adds vertical navigation to the simulator. To get started, we need to know a few things. We need to know the aircraft altitude, the airport altitude, our indicated airspeed, our ground speed, and the wind. The first thing that we will need to do is know the altitude of the airport we are landing at. If this airport is only 50 feet above sea level, we can ignore it since it is so close to sea level. However, if we were landing at Denver International Airport, which is roughly 5,000 feet above sea level, then it would make a difference. So once you figure out the altitude of the airport, simply subtract that altitude from the current altitude of your plane. Let's just say I was heading to John F. Kennedy Airport, which is pretty much at sea level, to make things simple. If I was cruising at 35,000 feet, I would simply cut off the two zeros at the end to make it 350, and then I would divide that number by 3. So 350 divided by 3 equals 116 nautical miles. Now this is the absolute minimum distance I will need to descend. Now speed is another thing. We can't land the aircraft at 310 indicated airspeed, so we have to reduce our speed on the way down. A good average descent speed is 200 knots. A good speed reduction for the majority of aircraft is reducing the speed by 10 knots for every 1 nautical mile. So I have a target speed of 200 knots, and let's just say my aircraft is currently traveling at 320 knots. Well, I need to subtract these numbers to find out how much speed I need to reduce by in order to reach 200 knots. This is easily done in my head, which comes out to 120 knots. 320 minus 200 equals 120 knots. Now, I would take that number and divide it by 10, which is 12 nautical miles. This is how many nautical miles it should take me to reduce my speed down to 200 knots. The final thing we must take into account is the wind. This is pretty simple. The reduction is only 1 nautical mile for every 10 knots of wind. So if I have a 20 knot tailwind, I would add 2 nautical miles to my descent. If it is a headwind, then I would subtract 2 nautical miles. So with the example above, I am at 35,000 feet, divided by 3 gives me 116 nautical miles. Now, my speed needs to be reduced by 120 knots to get down to 200 knots, and this will take me 12 nautical miles, 120 divided by 10. And finally, my 20 knot tailwind will add 2 nautical miles. So, add all of those up, and I will need to start my descent 130 nautical miles out from the runway. Another good rule of thumb is to take your ground speed and multiply it by 5, and that will be your vertical speed when you are descending. So if my ground speed was 300 knots times 5 equals 1500 feet per minute that I should be descending to maintain a 3-degree glide slope. The best method to use though is the 3 rules above using altitude, speed, and wind. Your goal should be to fly the entire descent with idle power and only apply thrust after the final flap setting. So, 3 main rules of descending you should remember are: altitude without the 2 zeros divided by 3 gives the minimum distance you need to descend. Find out how much speed you need to reduce by to get 200 knots and then divide that by 10. Add 1 nautical mile for every 10 knots of tailwind, and subtract 1 nautical mile for every 10 knots of headwind. Now, let's head into Microsoft Flight Simulator and execute these rules. Alright guys, we are now in the simulator, and I'm currently on an approach to Charlotte. If we look on my ND here, Charlotte's right here at the very end, and we're about 119, 120 nautical miles away. So this is where we would start calculating our top of descent, because as you can tell, we do not have a top of descent shown on our ND. Well, the little white arrow is here, but it's not accurate at all. So we got to do it ourselves. Let me just get that to standard, just like that. Alright, anyway, so we are at 30,000 feet above sea level. So at 30,000 feet, remember what we want to do is take off 2 zeros, so that leaves us with 300. You can kind of tell there, 300. And then divide that by 3, which gives us 100. So 100 nautical miles, that is the minimum distance we need to be to start our descent. Alright, but now we got to add some things. So if we look over here on our ND, we currently have a tailwind of 15 knots. So this is going to add 1.5 nautical miles to our descent. So now we're left with 101.5. And the final thing is we got to take our indicated airspeed, which is a little over 300, but to make things simple, we can just call it 300 knots. And what we want to do with this is divide 300, or sorry, you want to find out how to get 300 to 200. So what is that difference? 300 to 200, pretty easy. That's 100 knots. So, and then we'll take that 100 knots and divide it by 10. And that's going to give us 10 nautical miles. So then we add 10 nautical miles because, again, we want to be at 200 knots during our descent. So 10 nautical miles plus 1.5 nautical miles plus 100 gives us a total of 111.5 nautical miles, which is when we would like to start our descent. And it looks like we're coming up on it here soon. It's in between 80 and 120, which is 100. So we are going to start descending momentarily. The other rule of thumb that I mentioned is taking your ground speed, which for me is currently 470, and multiplying that by 5, and that gives you your vertical speed, or how much you need to descend. So that comes out to 2,350 feet per minute, which is what we should start descending. Now we are crossing about 110 or 100 nautical miles, so we do need to start descending. So I'm actually going to come down here and reduce my Mach down to about 200. I'm going to come down to vertical speed, and if it would let me adjust this, that'd be wonderful. We're going to knock our altitude down to, let's say, 2,000 feet, and we're going to reduce our vertical speed to what I just said, about negative 2,300 feet per minute, and then we can engage vertical speed or not. Okay, here we go. There we go. Okay, now vertical speed. That's a little funky. Anyway, now we're on vertical speed, descending at negative 2,300 feet per minute. Alright, and remember I said the goal is to leave the throttles idle. Your goal should be you should not have to add any power until your final flap setting. So we're going to see if I can do that. Now, I started my descent a little late because we are crossing over our 80 nautical mile band, and we're about 80 nautical miles out from Charlotte, so we might have to descend a little quicker, but that's okay because we are slowing down and we are descending pretty quickly. Because see, now my ground speed changed, and if I multiply 386 by 5, then that's only pretty much 2,000 feet per minute. So we are descending a little quicker than we need to, but that's just fine since we are a little closer to the airport than I expected. So we are at idle throttle, trying to get down to 200 knots. Another thing you can use is your speed brakes in order to slow down quicker if the plane is not slowing down, just like that. And we can check our speed, and you can engage the speed brake all the way down to your desired speed. But if you do use your speed brake, there's odds are you're going to have to use your throttles, and remember, that's not what we want to do. We want to leave our throttles idle all the way down. That's the most efficient that we can be. Alright, so I'm going to continue descending at negative 2,300 feet per minute, and I'll get back to you guys when we're a little closer to the airport. Alright guys, now I'm less than 60 nautical miles away from Charlotte, and the aircraft did actually have to just add some thrust because there is an altitude constraint here at Banker. If I click my constraints right here, we see that it is at 17,500 feet, and we can also see that down here on the MCDU, 175. So the Airbus is going to do that. It will automatically hold at different constraints. Like once we pass Banker, then it is going to start descending again. But if you were going direct to an airport, you could descend at that exact what I had, the negative 2,300 feet per minute, and it would give you a perfect 3-degree glide slope all the way down to the airport. So guys, we see that it is starting to descend again from 17,500 feet, and that is because we need to be at 11,000 feet by the time we hit Opals right here. And that's exactly where it's going, and we'll see that the vertical speed is actually negative 2,000, about 600 feet per minute, which is pretty dang close to that calculation I did earlier, which was 2,300 feet per minute of descent rate. So this is a 3-degree glide slope to get all the way down to the airport, and we see we're going to make this left-hand turn right here, and by Marho we should be at 4,000 feet, and that's exactly where the plane's going to put us, and that will be the setup for the capturing of the glide slope and the localizer. Alright guys, so after a steady descent, we are now holding at 4,000 feet, which is exactly where we need to be for Marho, and our localizer is now coming into view, so I can engage the LOC, just like that. And at this point we can start lowering our flaps and reducing our speed down, which again falls into, you know, idle throttle all the way down, or as much as possible at least. And we can see the runway right in front of us lining up with the localizer. And since the glide slope is alive, we can engage the APPR button, which is approach, and we are now on the glide slope and localizer. So from here on out we can go ahead and drop the gear now that we are established on both the localizer and the glide slope. Start lowering our speed a little more and lowering our flaps. Alright guys, and I have all my gear down and the flaps are down, speed brake's armed. Go ahead and arm the auto brake, and we can perform the landing at this point. And we have been established on the glide slope and localizer, of course. I am actually going to lower my speed a little more down to about 140. Oh my gosh, give me 140. There we go. And we are good to land the plane at this point, from coming down from 30,000 feet using our calculations. So it worked out pretty dang well. Now of course, if you are on VATSIM or Pilot Edge, then the tower will let you know when to descend, but these are really good rules to keep in mind and to be able to do on your own if ATC forgets about you or something. Like, you don't want to just be stuck up there forever and the ATC not tell you to descend if they forget about you. Alright, and there's the touchdown, everybody. Got our reversers out, spoilers are out. And the reversers can come off, and it's manual braking from here. Alright, and everybody, that is how you properly descend and do the calculations and all that good stuff and successfully land on the runway. So it's pretty straightforward. Just practice it a little bit, memorize those calculations, and you will be just fine. So guys, that's going to do it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned how to descend properly. I've been working on this video for a while now, learning all about it myself, and I learned even more now that I've actually taught it, so that's wonderful. Be on the lookout for some more Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 videos and live streams. As always, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day or night. Links to my Discord and Patreon are in the description. Check those out, and I will see you guys on the next video.